Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulaziz, and I'd like to thank ADX for hosting the workshop today. So as mentioned by Mr. Abdulaziz, ESCA, along with the exchanges, both ADX and DFM, are working hand in hand to develop the local financial markets. So all of this development has went through different stages. One of the latest stages has been the result, which is the upgrade from frontier markets to emerging markets. This was not a target in itself. The target is to develop the local financial markets so that they can contribute to the GDP of the UAE. The result is obviously there. Hopefully the next result will be the upgrade from emerging markets to developed markets. However, this upgrade is quite steep because to get to the developed markets stage, it needs a lot of work, and it needs financial markets with a lot of depth, vertically as well as horizontally. And that is precisely why I've labeled my presentation this morning from stock markets to capital markets. Like many emerging markets, stock markets are a place where retail investors trade stocks. Our aim is to transform these markets and make them capital markets, a place where seekers of capital meet with providers of capital, so that an exchange of capital takes place. This usually happens between institutional investors and not with retail investors. When the local financial market started, it was almost 100% retail market. Slowly but surely, it's transforming. It is today less than 70% retail and more than 30% institutional. And this graph is going up. So it is attracting more and more institutionals. Now, one of these elements in transforming the market is the availability of information, financial information of listed companies. Now, ESCA, along with both exchanges ADX and DFM, and based on an initiative from ADX specifically, we have introduced the XBRL system, the Extensible Business Reporting Language System. This is an e-filing initiative which allows listed companies to file their financial statements using electronic means. And some of the companies present here were among the first ones to do that, like NBAD, for example. Now, just having financial data is enough. It's not enough, actually. This data will need to be explained and transmitted to the final investor. So just having data on a website will not be sufficient. Investor relations in most developed markets play this role. It is the portal, it is the mirror of listed companies. It is the department or the person, in case of an IRO, investor relations officer, to explain and transmit this financial data. Because of that, the authority has decided to make investor relations in the UAE mandatory to all listed companies as per the corporate governance regulation. So not too long ago, the authority has amended the corporate governance regulation, and it has included a clause in it that makes investor relations mandatory to all listed companies to whom this regulation applies. Now, we've also issued guidelines to explain what is requested from listed companies to implement investor relations. The aim is three targets mainly. Improve the availability, reliability, and comparability of listed companies' financial and non-financial data. So as I said, just having a financial report on a website is not enough. This is not availability. Availability is when you have someone who understands the listed company, who's able to explain this data. This is when the data becomes available, it becomes reliable, and it becomes comparable. You'll be able to compare it to other listed companies' data. The second target is to attract institutional investors and foreign investors. When the listed companies have someone to answer the calls of investors and financial analysts to explain the financial data and explain the story behind the financial data, because this is what generally analysts and institutionals look for. It's not just numbers. It is, why is the data this way? Why is revenue going up or going down? Why are costs going up or down? What is the strategy of the company? And this is the role of the IRO. And finally, the result, the reclassification. Among the big list of things we have to do as an authority and as exchanges, one of them is listed companies have to have investor relations. Now, in the guidelines that were issued by the authority, there's a set that is mandatory to all listed companies, mandatory guidelines, and there's a set that is optional for the time being. These optional guidelines will become mandatory at a later stage. Now, the first and most obvious one is to appoint an investor relations officer. This is a person whose job or partial job is to answer investors, institutionals, analysts, and retail investors about the company performance, about the financial reports, and anything related to the listed company. Now, the requirements for the IRO are as follows. He needs to be fluent in Arabic and English, Arabic being the official language of the UAE, and English obviously as the international language. He should have the necessary qualifications in relation to business, accounting, and public relations. So he shouldn't be a public relations officer, full stop. He shouldn't be an accountant, full stop. He shouldn't be a CFA charter holder, full stop. He needs to be a multitasker. So he needs to be good in public relations. He needs to be a good accountant. And the next point, he needs to know the legal framework within which the listed company operates. So the necessary relevant legal framework is important as well when explaining the activities of the listed company. He needs to be fully informed of the listed company's activities and opportunities, and able to explain the rationale behind the company's performance. He needs to master diverse communication channels and be very much client-oriented. So he needs to be able to use Twitter, so all of the recent technological communication channels, and he needs to be client-oriented. He needs to be very patient and answer very unlikely questions from analysts or investors. I know this is very much qualitative and subjective. These are not objective qualities that we can quantify, 1 + 1 = 2. However, we count on the listed company's goodwill in trying to find the person that has these qualities and potentially train existing individuals to become or have these qualities. And finally, the ability to convey to investors complex notions in a simple, understandable way. So not drown the investor in very complicated ratios. Second, mandatory again, establish a section dedicated to IR on the company's website. Before I continue that, you might have the question as a listed company, do we have to appoint an independent, distinct IRO within the company? At this stage, the answer is no. So an existing officer within the company can assume the job of an IRO. So for example, the CFO, the CIO, the CEO, so any C-level officer could assume the responsibilities of an IRO as part of his job. However, this needs to be very clearly stated in the organigram and on the website of the company that this person is the CFO plus IRO of the company. So the second point, establish a section dedicated to IR on the company's website. This is very simple, very straightforward, and not very costly basically. So this section needs to be labeled investor relations section, for example. It needs to have all the contact details and names of the persons working within the investor relations department, and particularly the IRO. It needs to contain all published financial and non-financial reports, so public reports obviously. And finally, the current year data, including the financial reports publication dates, future dates, the minutes of the AGMs and EGMs, and any material information that could be relevant to investors. The third mandatory requirement, the company should publish on its website all the information and data disclosed to the regulators, exchanges, or the public. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is an example of what needs to be published. So any news or events relevant to the company, as well as material events. All the quarterly reports and board reports for the past years. Again, here we did not specify if it's 5, 7, or 10 years. Okay? Just said several years. It is recommended that it's at least for 5 years. The corporate governance report, the ownership structure and proportions, and up-to-date public information relevant to the activities, strategy, vision, and any future plans of the company. So the investor can place the financial reports of the company within the general context of the strategy. Public pricing information about the stock of the company. So this can include the last close, the opening price, the high, the low during the year, as well as the benchmark. So if it's a ADX listed company, the ADX index pricing information can be included on the website as well. Very important point, the mechanism by which investors can claim their unpaid dividends. As probably most of you know, unclaimed dividends are a serious issue, and some investors still don't know how to claim it. So a mechanism needs to be put on the website to explain to investors how to claim their dividends if they haven't claimed them already. And finally, the contact details of the IRO and the mechanism by which the investor can submit suggestions, remarks, and inquiries through the IR section. The fourth mandatory requirement, and yes, there is an overlap across these guidelines, the company will need to make on an annual basis, needs to make available a presentation, PowerPoint or any other format, but a presentation type, a generic presentation, to clarify the financial status and health of the company, the strategy, future plans and expectations, and potentially risks. This presentation will need to be updated on a quarterly basis every time the listed company publishes new financial reports, quarterly and annually, obviously. Now, again, this presentation will need to contain public information only, okay? Regarding strategy, expectations, again, these are general ones. No need to reveal secrets about the company or internal information about the company. Just to assist the analysts and investors to place this company within a specific context. These were the mandatory requirements. Now the optional requirements. The first one, present the financial reports through public conference calls. In most, if not all, developed markets, listed companies generally organize conference calls to present their financial results. So on this call, the IRO, the CFO or the CEO would be present, and they would explain the financial results of the company and then take questions from the attendees of this conference call. So this is recommended at this stage, but not mandatory. However, it is quite likely that this will become mandatory at a later stage. Roadshows. The company can organize, again optional, can organize conferences, meetings with investors, analysts, or any relevant parties to explain the results, attract investors, in case the company needs to increase its capital, and sort of be an ambassador to the financial market where it's listed. And finally, and I think most importantly, the financial analysts, the sell-side financial analysts. The company can increase the coverage of itself by speaking to sell-side brokers, financial analysts, to get them cover this company, to prepare write-ups and reports on this company. This would make this company visible locally, regionally, as well as internationally, because when there are recommendations and analysis of the company's financial reports, this assists in attracting investors. So these were the optional requirements. Now, the next stage in today's workshop will be sort of a panel discussion where a number of professionals, IR professionals, will be discussing some concrete aspects of the IR job, let's say. And following that, we will have a presentation done by representatives from Brunswick about why IR is important and what are the basics of IR. So this is all from me. If you would like to receive a copy of this presentation, please don't hesitate to send me an email. If you would like to receive the guidelines issued by the authority, you could email the disclosure department, the listing and disclosure department within the authority to receive a copy of these guidelines, knowing that these were sent to the office of the CEO of your company earlier this year. So thank you very much.